My name is Margaret, though everyone calls me Meg. I'm 67 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that retirement meant peace. Not easier, just quieter. But instead of silence, I found war. Not with age, but with my own family. I've been a widow for 15 years. My husband, Robert, was a man of logic and kindness, two things rarely found in one person. Together, we built our home, raised our daughter, and dreamed that one day our old age would look like a calm autumn, colorful, steady, full of warmth. But when he passed away, I learned something. Even autumn feels cold when the person who warmed it is gone. My daughter, Emily, was my light. She had his eyes and my stubbornness, a dangerous but beautiful combination. And when she got married, I truly thought happiness had found her again. Her husband, Thomas, was charming. Too charming. The kind of man who makes everyone doubt their instincts while quietly pulling every string in the room. At first, I didn't want to see it. Young couples argue, they make mistakes. I told myself not to interfere. But over the years, it became clear. Thomas didn't want harmony. He wanted control. After their wedding, they moved to the city. Thomas quickly climbed the corporate ladder in real estate, while my Emily gave birth to a little boy, Jamie. I visited often, cooked, cleaned, babysat, all the things a mother does to stay connected. But every time I crossed their doorstep, an invisible line appeared. My care on one side, his pride on the other. One afternoon, when Jamie was about 3, Thomas called me. He said he had an idea for the family. Apparently, it was time for me to sell my house and move closer to them. "Mom," he said, "it would be easier for everyone. We can find you something modern, safe, secure, all the amenities." But beneath that layer of concern was something sharper. Ownership. I refused. Not because I didn't want to be close to my family, but because I refused to let my life shrink into someone else's convenience. A few weeks later, I bought a small cabin in the woods, an hour away from the city, a place my heart recognized even before my mind agreed. Tall pines, a lake that smelled like rain, mornings painted in pink and gold, like old postcards that refused to fade. I wanted peace, but peace rarely comes unchallenged. For the first few months, I truly found silence again. I baked bread, planted herbs, and started keeping a small notebook, not for work or shopping lists, but for thoughts. And then one day, I saw the glare of a black SUV on my driveway. Thomas. He walked in with that same confidence he wore like cologne, the kind that fills a room before he even speaks. "Nice place, Margaret," he said, glancing around. "Cozy. Maybe a little lonely, though, don't you think?" I didn't answer. Silence is the best armor against men who mistake politeness for weakness. He looked around, inspecting every corner like a real estate agent appraising a property. Then he said, "You know, Emily and I were thinking of coming over this weekend. My parents might join us, too. They've been wanting to meet you properly." A small chill went down my spine. His parents. Even Emily spoke of them reluctantly. They were the kind of people who never said anything cruel outright. They simply made you feel smaller with every compliment. I smiled. "Of course, Thomas," I said. "I'll make something nice for dinner." He left looking satisfied. The smile of a man who believed he'd just secured another little piece of control. But as I watched his car disappear down the road, I thought, if people come into your home without respect, you teach them to find it. And I already knew how. It wouldn't be revenge. It would be a lesson. For days after Thomas's visit, I couldn't shake off that feeling. The quiet burn that sits in your chest when someone tries to move your life around like furniture. Thomas wasn't used to hearing no. To him, boundaries were just obstacles to negotiate. But this time, he would learn otherwise. I sat by the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching the pine trees sway in the wind. And then it came to me. If he wanted to bring his family here so badly, then let them come. I'd welcome them exactly the way they deserved to be welcomed. With kindness, but not submission. The next morning, I took out my old notebook. Its pages had been empty for months, but my hand didn't hesitate. I wrote a list: prepare dinner, clean the house, and lastly, plan the surprise. I drove to town that afternoon, the nearest market, a few local shops, the kind of places where people still greet you by name. I bought a new tablecloth, candles, fresh herbs, and then I stopped by a small farm outside the city, old friends of my late husband Robert. They supplied gourmet food to restaurants, organic vegetables, fresh cheese, and cuts of meat that looked like art. It was expensive, but quality always is. And if Thomas's family admired anything, it was the illusion of refinement. They expected me to be a sweet, simple woman with pie on the counter and gratitude in her eyes. They'd find someone else instead, calm, composed, and utterly in control. The day before their visit, I cleaned the house until it glowed. The smell of bread filled the air, soft jazz played in the background, and a stew simmered slowly in red wine. The kind of warmth you can't fake, no matter how much money you have. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Not the lonely widow everyone assumed I was, but someone reborn. I put on a dark green dress, the color of moss after rain, and pinned my hair with a small silver clip Robert once gave me. It wasn't vanity, it was memory, a reminder of who I was before anyone tried to redefine me. By 3 o'clock, I heard it, the deep hum of engines. 1, then 2, then 3 cars pulling into the driveway as if they were arriving at a gala. Thomas stepped out first, wearing that spotless shirt and sunglasses he thought made him look powerful. Behind him came his parents, Richard and Elizabeth, both polished and rigid, like porcelain dolls that had never known dust. And then Emily, holding little Jamie, tired but smiling. The kind of smile that hides exhaustion beneath manners. I walked out to meet them. I said, "Welcome. Dinner's almost ready." Elizabeth glanced around, her lips twitching in polite disapproval. "Oh, it's lovely," she said, but her tone said something else. "It's small. It's beneath us." Thomas looked around with a smirk. "Must get lonely out here, Mom. Aren't you afraid of being all alone in the woods?" I met his gaze and smiled. "The woods don't scare me, Thomas. Only people do. Sometimes." He didn't get the message. He never did. We sat down to dinner. The first few minutes went smoothly. Compliments on the food, polite chatter about work, the weather, Jamie's preschool. But I could feel it, the quiet weight of Thomas's curiosity. His eyes moved across every surface, assessing, calculating. To men like him, every space was either an opportunity or a weakness. Then he leaned back in his chair, smiling that smile that always came before an insult disguised as humor. "You know, Mom, this place has potential. You could really expand, maybe build a guest house, so when we visit, it's more comfortable for everyone." Elizabeth nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, yes, or even better, buy the adjoining lot. We could have our own cottage. How wonderful would that be?" I looked at them all and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, but clarity. So that was their real reason for coming.
Not family, real estate. I smiled softly. That's an interesting idea, I said. Actually, there's something I've been meaning to show you. A little surprise. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Oh, you've been renovating? Not exactly. It's something older. Something that's been here longer than any of us. I stood up, took the old lantern from the shelf, and gestured toward the door. Come with me. Emily looked uneasy. Mom, maybe tomorrow. It's getting dark. No, I said gently. Tonight's perfect. The path to the shed was narrow, the kind that makes even the proudest people walk single file. The light from my lantern painted long, trembling shadows across the ground. Behind me, I could hear Richard's quiet grumbling and the crunch of Thomas's expensive shoes on wet leaves. When we reached the shed, I pushed open the door. Inside, the air smelled of fresh wood and rain. A few large crates stood on the floor, neatly covered with canvas sheets. I pulled one back. Underneath, camping gear. Sleeping bags, lanterns, folding chairs, food supplies. Thomas frowned. What's all this? My guest house, I said simply. Under the stars. Elizabeth blinked. You're joking. Not at all. You said you wanted to experience nature together. Well, here it is. Quiet, clean, authentic. No Wi-Fi, no interruptions. The real family bonding. Thomas stared at me, his face slowly turning red. Mother, this is ridiculous. We're not camping. Oh, but Jamie will love it, I said warmly. And isn't family time what matters most? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Richard looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Elizabeth shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse as if mosquitoes might steal it. And then Emily laughed. A small laugh at first, then real, unguarded laughter that filled the air like sunlight after rain. Mom, you just won the family weekend. I turned to her and for the first time in years, saw something in her eyes that had been missing. Respect.
We ate dinner to the sound of soft jazz, Robert's old records playing faintly from the corner. The glow of candles flickered on the wine glasses, and for a moment, everything looked peaceful. But under that calm, I could feel it, a quiet current, strong and unspoken. Thomas talked endlessly about his work, his big clients, his clever strategies. His parents nodded approvingly, the kind of audience that measures worth in square footage and brand names. Emily sat silently, her smile fading with every word, her hand tracing small circles on the napkin. Little Jamie had already fallen asleep in the armchair. I let them talk. I wanted them to. Because people like that will always tell you who they are, if you let them hear themselves long enough. Finally, I said, "You know, Thomas, there's something I'd like to show you. This house, it has a secret most people don't know about." He grinned. Oh, renovation plans? Adding value already? I shook my head. No, something older than that. Something inherited. I stood, took the lantern again, and gestured toward the door. Come on, it's better if I show you. Emily hesitated, her eyes darting to the window. Mom, it's dark out. Maybe tomorrow? But I smiled. Some things only make sense in the dark. The forest was alive with sound. Crickets, wind, the soft creak of branches. The light from my lantern drew a warm circle ahead of us as we walked. Richard muttered about uneven ground. Elizabeth clutched her scarf. Thomas followed behind me, still trying to play it cool, though I could feel his curiosity pushing against his pride. We reached the shed. The wood was still damp from the rain, and the air smelled of pine and paint.
Inside, the crates sat exactly where I'd left them. I opened one, and they all leaned closer. Camping gear, brand new. Sleeping bags, lanterns, food boxes, and neatly folded blankets. Thomas blinked. Okay, what am I looking at here? I said, my guest house, under the stars. Elizabeth's voice went sharp. You can't be serious. I smiled. Of course I am. You said you wanted to spend time together, didn't you? This way, you'll get the full experience. Family, nature, peace. No distractions. Thomas scoffed. We're not exactly, camping people, Margaret. Oh, but Jamie will love it. You always say family time is what matters most, Thomas. Well, this is as pure as it gets. He stared at me, speechless, for the first time in his life. Richard frowned. This is highly unconventional. Perhaps. But then again, real families aren't built by convention. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Emily started to laugh. Not the polite kind of laugh she used to hide her nerves. This was real, free, loud enough to scare a bird off the roof. Mom, she said between giggles, I think you just won family weekend. I turned to her and smiled. And in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in her eyes in years. Pride. Back inside, the air had changed. The tension that used to cling to every conversation was gone. Thomas was quiet. His parents spoke less. Even Emily seemed lighter. I poured everyone a little more wine, though only I drank it. Then I started telling stories about how Robert and I found this cabin, about the nights we'd danced on this very floor when no one was watching. Every word was a reminder. I wasn't a guest in this house. I was its foundation. Elizabeth finally broke the silence. You've made this place beautiful, she said softly, almost surprised by her own tone. Thank you, I replied. It's not grand, but it's honest. That's all I ever wanted. For once, there was no hidden insult, just quiet acknowledgement.
People change when they're faced with dignity they can't buy. It unsettles them, forces them to look inward, where the price tags don't reach. After dinner, I carried tea and blankets out to the porch. The rain had washed the air clean, and the pines stood like dark, listening witnesses. We sat without speaking for a while, the kind of silence that either heals you or exposes you. Emily pulled her blanket to her chin and leaned against me, just like she used to when thunder scared her. Mom, she whispered, I haven't seen you like this in years. Happy, I mean. I stopped asking for permission, I said. Happiness tends to show up after that. She smiled, a small, private smile, and I felt something quiet settle back into place between us. Not the old mother-daughter dependence, but a steadier bridge we could both walk. Thomas paced for a minute, checking his phone even though he knew there was no signal out here. When he finally spoke, his voice had that thin edge I'd come to recognize, a blade disguised as charm. You know, he said, Robert used to call you stubborn. I see what he meant. You never listen. I didn't raise my voice. I listen, Thomas. I simply don't obey. Those are very different things. He scoffed. You think you know better than everyone. No, I said. I know what belongs to me. My time, my home, my boundaries, and I won't let anyone else spend them. He inhaled sharply, ready to fire back, and then Emily stood. Her voice was steady, not loud. Enough, Thomas. He looked at her like she'd suddenly changed languages. She didn't flinch. Stop talking to my mother like she's in your way. She's done more for us than you will ever admit.
She doesn't owe us convenience." That word hung in the air. Convenience. The thing so many people mistake for love. Thomas didn't answer. He pressed his lips together and walked inside, dragging the door's creak behind him. Emily sank back beside me. Her hand was cold, but I could feel the warmth returning. "I'm sorry," she said, "for letting it go on, for not seeing it sooner. You don't owe me an apology," I told her. "You just needed to hear your own voice." We stayed there until the crickets formed a kind of choir, and the distant creek stitched silver noise through the dark. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the soft clink of glass in the kitchen. Thomas stood by the window with a half-empty water glass in his hand, staring out into the night like it might argue back. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He didn't turn. "Do you think I'm a bad husband?" I walked a little closer, leaving space between us. "I think you got lost between who you wanted to be and what people expected you to look like. It happens to men who build lives out of mirrors." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I wanted things to be right, polished, respected. Respect isn't veneer, it's grain. You feel it when you run your hand across the surface, not when you squint from a distance." He stared at the glass as if it might answer for him. "So, you think you won tonight?" This isn't a game," I said gently. "It's a home. I'm not your competitor, Thomas. I'm the mother of your wife, the grandmother of your son. When you remember that, there's nothing to fight." He set the glass down with care, as if loudness itself might break something. Then he laughed without another word. I stayed by the window for a while. Rain started again, a quiet, even rain, and I felt a soft ache, not for him, but for the boy he must have been before the world taught him control was safer than tenderness. I didn't plan for the morning to be decisive. Mornings don't usually ask for permission either. I rose early and made coffee in Robert's old steel pot, the one that always leaves a faint roast note in the air. Jamie padded in with sleep-ruffled hair and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Birds?" he asked. "Birds," I said, "and a feeder we'll build after breakfast." Emily came down next, eyes clear, shoulders uncurled. She squeezed my hand and didn't have to say anything. Sometimes clarity arrives wordless. Thomas and his parents appeared last, dressed, guarded, perfectly composed, and slightly cracked. We ate in a politeness that felt almost sacred. No small talk, no barbs, just quiet people chewing the truth. When the plates were cleared, I took a thick envelope from the hutch and laid it on the table. "There's one more thing," I said. "Last night was the lesson. This morning is the policy." Richard's mouth tightened, the reflex of a man who assumes paper means leverage. Elizabeth folded her hands with the grace of someone who's never carried a box. "A week ago," I continued, "I signed a conservation easement with a local land trust. This land, from the porch to the lake, is permanently protected from development. It cannot be divided or sold for cottages or converted into guest houses. The forest remains a forest. And the cabin," I added, "is in a living trust. I manage it now. After me, Emily does, with the easement intact. No exceptions." I opened the envelope so the seals and signatures were visible. "This isn't against you," I said. "It's for the place, for what it gives to the people who come here to be humans instead of resumes." Silence. Not the empty kind, the absorbing kind. Thomas spoke first, clearing his throat. "You made a decision that affects the family without consulting us. I consulted the only person responsible for my life, and I protected what we don't have the right to sell. Air through the pines, a boy's feeder, jazz under rain. You negotiate with numbers. I negotiate with meaning." Elizabeth's eyes narrowed, but there was something new in them. Not disdain, calculation. You've thought this through. Yes, I said. And there's one more document. I slid a single printed page across the table. Neat, simple. House rules. 1. Give notice before visiting. 2. Work stays outside. Phones, calls, deals. 3. Children get the river, tools, and room to build. 4. Adults get honesty and respect. Break the rules, you leave, not as punishment, as a boundary. Richard exhaled through his nose, a sound I'd usually interpret as disapproval. This time it felt closer to recognition. You hold a line, he said. I can't say I like it, but I recognize it. I don't live by winning, I answered. I live by lines that keep us whole. Thomas pushed back from the table an inch, then stopped. The fight was still in him. I could see it, but so was something else, something heavy and human. He looked at Emily, and whatever he found in her gaze made him sit down again. I will stay, he said, the words rough, by the rules. Emily nodded once. The smallest movement, the biggest change. The day carried itself after that. Jamie and I built the bird feeder, a lopsided palace for sparrows, and hung it from the lowest branch so he could reach it. Emily helped me pinch basil leaves on the sill, the room filling with that green, brave scent of summer. Thomas chopped wood, haltingly at first, then with fewer mistakes. There's a sound an axe makes when it finally meets its purpose. He heard it. I did too. At dusk, we spread a blanket under the pines. I let the old record spin again, a saxophone that had outlived every trend. Jamie fell asleep with his head on my shoulder, the weight of him reminding me that futures are always lighter than fears. Thomas didn't reach for his phone. Maybe he forgot it inside. Maybe he finally remembered himself. The forest breathed. So did we. Thank you, Emily whispered, for the house, for my voice. It was always yours. I just turned the light on. That night, I left the hallway lamp glowing for the first time in years. Not for late arrivals, for myself. A small, steady vow, I will not dim to make others comfortable.
Morning in the woods is honest. It doesn't negotiate, doesn't embellish. It just pulls the night back like a curtain and says, "Look." I woke before sunrise, as I always do when a day has decided to be important without asking me. I brewed coffee in Robert's dented steel pot and watched steam lift like prayer. Outside, the needles were still wet. The world smelled rinsed. I heard a soft thud and turned to find Jamie, blanket dragging and bright-eyed. We fed a handful of seeds into his little feeder and stood together at the window, conspirators, waiting for the first sparrow to trust us. It took less than a minute. Small things are brave when you give them something to trust. Emily came down next. Her shoulders had dropped at least an inch overnight, a change so subtle only a mother would clock it. She kissed my cheek. No words. We didn't need any. Thomas and his parents arrived last, crisp and composed, wearing the kind of expressions people put on when they're about to pretend nothing happened. But something had. The room knew. So did the trees. We quietly. Not the sulk of silence, the steady kind that follows a truth you can't unsay. I cleared the dishes, took a breath, and set a small wooden frame near the entryway. Inside it, the house rules. 4 lines, level and unadorned. Thomas noticed first. His eyes flicked to mine. I nodded. He carried the frame outside, and without flourish, hammered the nail square and true. The sound rang clean against the morning. Richard and Elizabeth packed without commentary. At the door, Elizabeth paused. She looked at my kitchen, the window with the feeder, the corner where Robert's records live. All the things money cannot inventory. Your home, she said, is very you. Thank you, I answered. It was the first time she'd said something that didn't feel like a scaled compliment. Richard extended a hand. His palm was dry and firm, but the gesture was not transactional this time. It was equal. He said, "For what it's worth, clarity is rare. You have it." "I had to earn it," I said. "Most clarity costs a boundary." They drove away without gravel-spitting dramatics, the taillights winking and vanishing between the pines. The air felt larger, as if the house had exhaled. Thomas stood in the doorway for a long moment after the engine noise faded. "I'm not good at this," he said. "At which part?" I asked. "At not being in charge." He tried to smile and failed, which was somehow better than success. "You don't have to be in charge," I said. "You just have to be in it, present, with your own hands." He looked down at his palms, still roughened from splitting logs. "I can try," he said. Trying is a verb. It counts here. We spent the afternoon on small, generous tasks. Emily helped me transplant basil into pots Jamie had painted with crooked constellations. Thomas reinforced a loose step on the back stoop without being asked. We ate tomatoes that tasted like July. We lost a screw in the grass and found it by listening for the click against metal. Not magic, just attention. Later, I found Thomas standing by the feeder, as still as a scarecrow, watching a sparrow hop its way up the chain. "He trusts this place," he said, almost to himself. "Trust is cumulative," I told him. "It builds grain by grain." He nodded, then surprised me. "I always thought respect came from being impressive." I said, "It can, but it lasts longer when it comes from being reliable." He didn't argue. The day had cured him of argument. We grilled dinner on the little rusted rack Robert and I used when we were poor and happy and didn't know which part mattered more. We ate on the steps. Jamie fell asleep on Emily's lap before the stars even made their case. When it was time to go, Emily lingered. She tucked a note into my palm. "For when I can't say it out loud," it read. After they left, I unfolded the scrap of paper at the entryway. "Mom, I thought I was protecting us by keeping the peace. I see now I was keeping a performance. Thank you for showing me the difference. I love you." I kept the note where I keep my recipes, the box where I store everything that feeds me. Days turned into a gentle pace of living. The easement paperwork came back stamped and filed. The land trust sent a small sign for the path, no larger than a hand. It read, "Protected in perpetuity." I placed it where you have to slow down to read it. Some truths should be discovered at walking speed. The center of our family shifted not to me, but to the house. That was important. A home is a better anchor than a person. A person needs to travel sometimes. Jamie began to name the birds as if he were hiring them. "This is Mr. Red. He works mornings." I started a ledger in my notebook, labeled Repairs and Joy. We logged both with equal seriousness. There were missteps, of course. A month later, Thomas arrived once without notice and found the door locked. He stood on the porch with his briefcase in pride and called Emily, who did not answer. 30 minutes later, he texted me, a single line. "May I come in?" I wrote back, "Next time, tell me when you're on your way. Today, yes, come in." He did. He took off his shoes unprompted and wiped the step where his heel had scuffed it. Boundaries teach etiquette faster than lectures. Richard and Elizabeth sent a package, linen napkins with tiny stitched pines in the corner. No note, none required. I used them the next time she visited and said only, "These hold a crease beautifully." We understood each other better at the edges than we ever had in the middle. One evening, Emily and I sat with tea while the men argued amicably about the best way to stack wood. "Did we fix him?" she asked with a half smile. "No," I said. "We gave him a place where fixing himself is rewarded." "And if he slides back?" she asked. "Then the rules hold while we rest." She exhaled. "I can live with that." So could I. In early fall, when the air learned how to be thin again, I found the silver hairpin Robert gave me on our 10th anniversary. It had slipped behind a drawer and waited there like a patient memory. I pinned my hair for no reason at all. That's a reason, too.
I wrote more in my notebook. Not lists anymore, but letters. To Robert, to Emily at 12, to a future Jamie who will be taller than all of us and still remember which branch holds the feeder. I wrote one to the woman I was the day Thomas first pulled into my driveway. You were never stubborn, I told her. You were fluent in your own life and had forgotten the sound of your language. Don't apologize for learning it again. On the first truly cold night, the three of them came back with firewood and ridiculous hats. We cooked soup and ate it out of the wrong bowls. The feeder swung in the wind and didn't spill because Jamie had tightened the knot in a way only children know. After dinner, Thomas reached for a record and chose the one Robert always chose when rain made the windows more interesting than television. Good pick, I said. He said, I'm learning. We didn't toast to anything. We didn't need to. Some victories are the kind you hold in your mouth, like a sweet you don't bite through, slow, dissolving, meant to last. Before bed, I left the hallway lamp on again. Not superstition, a practice, a way of telling my body, you are allowed to be lit. In the morning, I added a final line to the first page of the notebook, under the 3 sentences that started all this. Leave the light on, not for guests, for yourself. I closed the cover and set the book back in its spot, not hidden, not displayed, ready. Out on the porch, the woods made their winter promise. Stillness without stagnation. I breathed it in and felt my life fit in my chest the way rooms fit when you put the furniture where it always wanted to go. This is the part of the story where other people like to say, and then everything was perfect. It wasn't. Perfection is sterile. What I had was better. A home with rules, a family that learned to meet there, a grandson who believes sparrows have work shifts, a son-in-law who can be decent when the scaffolding of performance is taken down, a daughter who remembered the sound of her own voice. And me, a woman who did not move closer to her family by shrinking. I made space by making space sacred. There's a difference. It holds. If you're listening and you're where I was, in the quiet that feels like a warning, I can tell you this with the authority of someone who has rebuilt a life with a kettle and a boundary. You don't have to get louder. You have to get clearer. The forest will meet you where you are. So will the people who can love you without owning you. The rest will go back to the city and tell stories about a woman in the woods who wouldn't sell. Let them. They'll miss out the part where she taught them how to stay. I turned off the porch light and let the hallway lamp glow. Not a beacon, not a signal. Just proof. The house did not feel empty when the door closed behind me. It felt occupied by everything that mattered.